The morning sun had barely risen when Michael Chen's alarm blared through his small apartment. He reached over with tired eyes and turned it off before it could wake his kids in the next room. Another day, another early start. At 42, Michael's face carried the gentle lines of someone who'd seen his fair share of hard times, but his eyes still held a spark that life hadn't managed to dim. He moved quietly through the apartment, careful not to disturb 10-year-old Lily and 14-year-old Nate, who were still deep in sleep. Michael had mastered the art of silent morning routines over the past 5 years, ever since their mom, Diane, had lost her battle with cancer. The thought of her still brought an ache to his chest, but he'd learned to carry it alongside the joy of raising their children. In the tiny kitchen, he prepared 3 lunches: turkey and cheese sandwiches with apple slices for the kids, and a simple peanut butter sandwich for himself. He scribbled quick notes for each lunch bag: "Ace that math test" for Lily and "good luck at basketball tryouts" for Nate. These little messages were a tradition he'd started when they were younger, and though Nate pretended to be too cool for them now, Michael had caught him saving a few in his desk drawer. By 5:30 a.m., Michael was dressed in his gray uniform with High Ridge Tower maintenance stitched across the pocket. He gently woke the kids, made sure they had breakfast, and ran through their schedules for the day. "Mrs. Rodriguez is picking you up from school," he reminded them. "I've got the evening shift too, so I won't be home until after dinner." "Dad?" "That's the 3rd time this week," Nate said, his voice caught between concern and teenage frustration. Michael squeezed his son's shoulder. "I know, buddy. The Johnson twins' mom is paying me to fix her leaky sink tonight. That's $50 extra toward your basketball shoes." Nate's face softened. "You don't have to do that, Dad." "Yeah, I do. That's what dads are for." Michael smiled, though the weight of being both mother and father, provider and nurturer, felt especially heavy some mornings. After getting the kids off to school, Michael made the hour-long bus ride downtown to High Ridge Corporate Tower, a gleaming 50-story glass and steel monument to success that stood in stark contrast to his own modest life. He'd been working there as a janitor for nearly 3 years now, ever since the factory where he'd worked for 15 years had shut down and moved operations overseas. The massive lobby of High Ridge Tower always made Michael feel small. Executives in tailored suits and designer shoes hurried past without a glance in his direction, as if the man in the gray uniform was just another fixture like the potted plants or trash cans. He'd become used to being invisible. Sometimes he even preferred it that way. Michael clocked in at the maintenance office in the basement where his supervisor, Doug, handed him his assignment sheet for the day. "Floor 32 needs extra attention," Doug said. "Big presentation happening today, and the piano in the executive lounge needs dusting. They're having some fancy event tonight." "Got it," Michael nodded, gathering his supplies onto his cart. "How are the kids?" Doug asked. Unlike most people at High Ridge, Doug actually saw Michael as a person with a life beyond mopping floors. "They're good. Nate's trying out for the basketball team today." "That boy's got talent," Doug smiled. "Takes after his old man, I bet." Michael laughed. "Not with basketball. I was terrible." What Doug didn't know, what almost nobody knew anymore, was that Michael had once been gifted at something else entirely. As he rode the service elevator up to the 32nd floor, his mind drifted back to a different life, one where his hands created beauty instead of just scrubbing away dirt. 25 years ago, Michael had been a promising young pianist. His music teacher had called him a natural talent, someone who could make the piano sing in a way that most students couldn't achieve with years of practice. He'd even earned a partial scholarship to a music program at the state university, but then his dad had gotten sick, and college plans were replaced by full-time work to help support the family. The scholarship went unused, and the dream of music faded into the background of a life centered on practical needs. Michael still remembered how the keys felt under his fingers, how the music seemed to flow directly from his heart through his hands. Every now and then, when the kids were at school, he'd visit the community center where they had an old upright piano. The staff knew him there and would let him play during quiet hours. Those stolen moments were like taking deep breaths after being underwater too long. The elevator dinged as it reached the 32nd floor, pulling Michael back to his reality. He pushed his cart out and began his usual routine, starting with the restrooms, then the break room, before moving on to vacuum the offices and meeting spaces. The conference room needed special attention today. so he took extra time polishing the long mahogany table until he could see his reflection in it. As he worked, Michael overheard snippets of conversation about the big presentation. Apparently, the company was being considered for a major contract, one that would mean millions in revenue and possible promotions for many of the execs. The nervous energy on the floor was palpable. If we land the Westfield account, Richard will finally have to acknowledge my contribution, a woman in a sharp blue suit said to her colleague as they hurried past Michael without a glance. Don't count on it. He's already positioning Thomas to lead the project, the other replied. Office politics. Michael was grateful to be outside that particular rat race, though he sometimes wondered what it would be like to have a job where his biggest worry was who got credit for a project, rather than how to make rent that month. By mid-afternoon, he'd made his way to the executive lounge on the 50th floor. Unlike the sterile, practical spaces on the lower floors, the executive lounge was all luxury. Plush leather chairs, artwork on the walls, a small bar in the corner, and near the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city, a beautiful grand piano. The room was empty as Michael began dusting and vacuuming. He saved the piano for last, carefully lifting the lid to dust the strings inside with a soft cloth. The piano was a Steinway, probably worth more than what Michael earned in several years. His fingers itched to touch the keys, but he knew better. Playing the executive's piano would be a quick way to lose his job. Still, as he ran the cloth over the black and white keys, cleaning them one by one, he couldn't help but remember. His mind filled with music. Chopin, Debussy, even some of the Beatles arrangements he used to play for Diane when they were dating. Those had made her smile in a way that still warmed his heart to remember. What are you doing? The sharp voice made Michael jump. He turned to find Richard Klein, the CEO of High Ridge Investments, standing in the doorway. Tall, imposing, with silver hair and a gaze that seemed to calculate everyone's worth in dollars and cents, Klein was known throughout the building as a demanding but brilliant businessman. Just cleaning the piano. Sir, Michael said, quickly closing the lid. For the event tonight. Klein gave a curt nod. Make sure you don't scratch it. That's an $80,000 instrument? Yes, sir. I'm being careful. Klein seemed satisfied with that and moved to the bar where he poured himself a drink. Michael continued his work, aware of the CEO's presence but trying to remain invisible as usual. Do you play? Klein asked unexpectedly, gesturing toward the piano with his glass. The question caught Michael off guard. I used to a long time ago. Was all Klein said before turning his attention to his phone. Michael finished his cleaning quickly and pushed his cart toward the door, eager to escape the uncomfortable interaction. But as he reached the doorway, Klein spoke again. What's your name? Michael Chen, sir. How long have you worked here, Chen? Almost 3 years, sir. Klein looked at him thoughtfully. You have children? Again, Michael was surprised. He couldn't remember ever speaking with the CEO before today, let alone having him ask personal questions. Yes, sir. 2 kids, 14 and 10. Klein nodded as if confirming something to himself. My father played piano. Classical, mostly. Said it kept him sane in an insane business world. He set his glass down with a soft clink. Carry on, Chen. As Michael left the executive lounge, he couldn't help but wonder about the unexpected conversation. In 3 years, this was the first time Richard Klein had spoken to him as anything other than just the janitor. It was strange to be briefly seen as a person with a past, with children with a life beyond his gray uniform. Michael continued his rounds, moving through the building like a ghost, cleaning up after people who rarely noticed his existence. Yet as he worked, his thoughts kept returning to the piano upstairs and the music that had once filled his life with purpose and joy. That night, after finishing his regular shift and then fixing Mrs. Johnson's sink, Michael finally made it home just after 9 p.m. The apartment was quiet, the kids already in bed. A note from Mrs. Rodriguez on the counter told him they'd finished their homework and that Lily had aced her spelling test. There was no news about Nate's basketball tryouts yet. Exhausted, Michael sank onto the worn couch, his body aching from a long day of physical labor. But despite his tiredness, his mind was oddly alert, filled with memories of music and wandering paths not taken. His fingers tapped out a silent melody on the armrest of the couch, muscle memory from years ago still surprisingly intact. Tomorrow would be another early morning, another day of being invisible, But for now, in the quiet of his apartment with his sleeping children nearby, Michael allowed himself to remember when his hands had created beauty, instead of just scrubbing it clean. 2 weeks had passed since Michael's brief interaction with Richard Klein, and life had continued in its usual rhythm. Wake up, make lunches, get the kids to school, clean floors, fix things, come home tired. The only break in the routine was the good news that Nate had made the basketball team, which meant additional expenses for proper shoes and team fees, but also a pride that made Michael's chest swell whenever he thought about it. Tonight was different, though. As Michael pushed his cleaning cart through the 50th floor, he could hear the sounds of celebration coming from the main conference room. High Ridge had won the Westfield contract. The news had spread through the building like wildfire, and now the company's executives were celebrating with an extravagant party. Michael kept his head down as he moved through the hallways. On evenings like this, it was even more important to be invisible. Drunk executives weren't known for their patience with maintenance staff getting in their way. "Hey, you. Janitor!" Michael turned to see a group of men and women in expensive suits standing near the entrance to the executive lounge. They were clearly several drinks into the evening, their faces flushed with alcohol and success. "Yes, sir?" Michael asked, approaching cautiously. The man who had called out to him was Bradley Porter, one of the senior vice presidents known throughout the building for his arrogance. "We need more ice in the lounge, and clean up the spill by the bar." "Right away, sir," Michael replied, steering his cart toward the lounge. The room was a mess. Empty glasses sat on every surface, napkins littered the floor, and as Bradley had mentioned, someone had spilled what looked like red wine near the bar. Michael set to work quietly, filling the ice bucket first, then tackling the spill. As he cleaned, the group that had followed him in grew louder, celebrating their victory with expensive whiskey. Michael tried to tune them out until he heard his name. "Chen, right? You're the one who told Mr. Klein you play piano," said a woman he recognized as Vivian Taylor, the head of marketing. Michael straightened up from the floor where he'd been cleaning. "I mentioned I used to play, yes." Bradley Porter laughed, leaning against the grand piano. "Oh, this I've got to hear. Our janitor is a pianist." The way he said the word made it sound like a joke. "I really should finish cleaning," Michael started, but Porter cut him off. No, I insist. Play something for us. The night's young and we could use some entertainment." There was a challenging gleam in Porter's eyes, and the others watched with amused expressions. Michael looked at the piano, then at the group of executives. He knew what this was, a chance for them to have a laugh at his expense. He should refuse and get back to work. That would be the sensible thing to do. But then his eyes fell on the piano again, the beautiful Steinway that probably hadn't been played with real feeling in years. "Just one song," Michael found himself saying. Porter's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He clearly hadn't expected Michael to accept the challenge. Well, our janitor has courage. The floor is yours, maestro." He stepped back with a mocking bow, and the group of executives formed a loose semicircle, their faces showing various degrees of amusement and curiosity. Michael approached the piano slowly, his heart pounding. It had been months since he'd played at the community center, and years since he'd touched an instrument of this quality. He sat down on the bench, adjusted his position, and took a deep breath. For a moment, doubt crept in. What was he doing? These people were expecting to laugh at him. If he played poorly, it would only confirm their low opinion. If he somehow managed to play well, would it even matter to them? Either way, he'd still be just the janitor tomorrow. Then he thought of Nate and Lily, of how he always told them to be proud of who they were and what they could do, of how he encouraged them to never let anyone make them feel small. Michael placed his hands on the keys. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the room, tentative at first as Michael's fingers remembered their way, but within moments the music began to flow, his hands moving with increasing confidence across the keys. The gentle, dreamlike melody spilled into the air, transforming the ostentatious lounge into something more intimate, more human. Michael closed his eyes, letting the music take him. He'd always loved this piece for its quiet beauty, for the way it seemed to capture both melancholy and hope in the same delicate notes. As he played, the years fell away. He wasn't a janitor anymore, a widower, or a struggling single dad. He was just a man making music, connecting with something deeper than job titles or bank accounts. When he opened his eyes, He saw that the smirks had vanished from the executives' faces. They were watching him with expressions ranging from shock to something that looked almost like respect. Bradley Porter's mouth hung slightly open, his drink forgotten in his hand. Michael continued playing, the music growing in complexity and emotion. His fingers danced across the keys, coaxing out the nuances of Debussy's composition with a sensitivity that came from understanding the heart of the piece, not just its notes. As the final gentle chords faded into silence, the room remained still. Michael sat motionless at the piano, his hands resting lightly on the keys, suddenly aware of what he'd just done. Then from the doorway came the sound of slow, deliberate applause. Michael turned to see Richard Klein standing there, his usual stern expression replaced by something unreadable. How long had the CEO been listening? "Mr. Chen," Klein said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "I believe you undersold your talents when we spoke." A flush crept up Michael's neck. "It's been a long time since I really played, sir." "And yet you play like that?" Klein stepped further into the room. "Where did you learn?" The other executives seemed to hold their breath, all eyes moving between Michael and their boss. "I had a good teacher in high school," Michael said, "and I was going to study music in college, but..." He trailed off, not wanting to share his personal history with this audience. "But life had other plans," Klein finished for him, nodding as if he understood perfectly. Michael stood up from the piano bench. "I should get back to work." "Wait," said Vivian Taylor, the marketing executive who had first recognized him. "That was beautiful. Could you play something else?" The request seemed genuine, without the mockery that had been in Porter's challenge. Michael hesitated, looking around the room. The atmosphere had changed completely. Where there had been condescension, there was now curiosity. "Please," added another executive whose name Michael didn't know. With a deep breath, Michael sat back down. This time he chose Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece that had always reminded him of Diane. His fingers found the melody easily, the bittersweet notes rising and falling like memories. As he played, more people drifted into the lounge, drawn by the unexpected music. Some held drinks, others leaned against walls or sat in the plush chairs, but all watched with evident surprise as the janitor they'd passed 100 times without really seeing filled the room with such beauty. When the second piece ended, the applause was immediate and genuine. Michael stood up quickly, uncomfortable with the attention but also feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. A sense of pride in this gift he'd set aside for so long. "I really should finish my work now," he said, moving toward his abandoned cleaning cart. "Of course," Klein said, stepping aside to let him pass. But as Michael reached the door, the CEO added, "Mr. Chen, I'd like to speak with you tomorrow. My office, 9 a.m. Michael's stomach dropped. Had he crossed a line by playing the piano? Was he about to lose his job over this? "Yes, sir," he managed to say before escaping into the hallway. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of anxiety. What did Klein want to talk about? Michael couldn't afford to lose this job. The health insurance alone was worth putting up with being invisible, with cleaning up after people who didn't see him as their equal. By the time he got home, long after midnight, his mind had run through dozens of worst-case scenarios. He checked on his sleeping children, finding comfort in their peaceful faces. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would figure something out. He always did. Morning came too quickly. After getting the kids off to school, Michael took the bus downtown, arriving at High Ridge Tower earlier than usual. He'd worn his cleanest uniform, hoping to make the best impression possible under the circumstances. The security guard at the reception desk did a double take when Michael asked to be directed to the CEO's office. "You've got a meeting with Mr. Klein?" the guard asked skeptically. "Yes. He asked to see me at 9. The guard made a quick call, and to Michael's surprise received confirmation. Elevator to 50, then left down the hall. "His assistant will be expecting you." The ride up to the 50th floor felt longer than usual. Michael's hands were clammy and he kept wiping them on his pants. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped into the familiar hallway. But this time he wasn't pushing a cleaning cart. This time he was a guest, or perhaps a prisoner heading to his sentence. Klein's assistant, a professionally dressed woman with kind eyes, looked up as he approached. "Mr. Chen, Mr. Klein is expecting you. Go right in." Michael took a deep breath and opened the door to the CEO's office. The room was impressive. Large windows overlooked the city, a massive desk dominated one end, and tasteful artwork hung on the walls. Richard Klein stood looking out the window, his back to the door. "Mr. Chen," he said, turning around. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Michael sat on the edge of an expensive-looking chair, his back straight, hands resting awkwardly on his knees. "Sir, if this is about last night, I apologize if I overstepped." Klein held up a hand. "This isn't a reprimand, Mr. Chen, quite the opposite." He sat down across from Michael. "I've worked in this building for 25 years. In all that time, I've never heard anyone play that piano the way you did last night." Michael wasn't sure how to respond. "Thank you, sir. You said you were going to study music. What happened?" The question was direct, personal in a way Michael hadn't expected. He shifted in his seat. "My father got sick my senior year. Cancer. I needed to work full-time to help support the family." Klein nodded, his face showing genuine interest. "And now? You have children of your own, I believe you mentioned." "Yes, sir. 2. My wife passed away 5 years ago." Something flickered across Klein's face. Recognition, perhaps, or empathy. "I'm sorry to hear that. I lost my wife 8 years ago. It changes everything, doesn't it?" The unexpected personal revelation from the CEO left Michael momentarily speechless. "Yes," he finally said. "It does." Klein leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, I have a proposition for you." Michael sat perfectly still, waiting for Richard Klein to continue. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the CEO's immaculate office. "We're hosting a charity gala next month," Klein said, his fingers tapping thoughtfully on the armrest of his chair. "It's for the Children's Hospital, our biggest fundraising event of the year. The board members, major donors, city officials, everyone who matters will be there." He paused, studying Michael's face. "I want you to play the piano at this event." Of all the things Michael had expected to hear, this wasn't even on the list. "Me? Play at your gala?" The words came out before he could stop them. Klein smiled slightly. "Yes, you. After what I heard last night, I can't think of a better choice." Michael's mind raced. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'm just the janitor. Your guests might expect someone professional." "What I heard last night was professional-level playing. Mr. Chen, whether you clean floors or conduct orchestras doesn't change that fact." Klein stood up and walked to his desk. "The gala is 4 weeks from Saturday. We would pay you, of course. $3,000 for a 45-minute performance, $3,000. Michael felt his breath catch. That was almost 2 months' salary from his maintenance job. It would cover Nate's basketball expenses, some of Lily's upcoming school needs, and maybe even start a small college fund for them. I haven't performed in public in over 20 years, Michael admitted, and I'd need somewhere to practice. "I don't own a piano. You can use the one in the executive lounge. Come in early or stay late. Whatever works with your schedule. No one will disturb you." Klein returned to his seat across from Michael. "Consider this an opportunity, Mr. Chen, for both of us." "Both of us?" Klein's expression grew more serious. "I'll be honest with you. The company has been criticized lately for how we treat our service staff. There have been accusations of elitism. Having someone from our maintenance team showcase extraordinary talent at our gala sends a message I'm very interested in sending." So there it was. Michael would be a symbol, a walking PR statement about how High Ridge valued all its employees, even the ones who emptied trash cans. Part of him wanted to refuse on principle. "But $3,000, can I think about it?" Michael asked. "Of course. Let me know by the end of the week." Klein stood, signaling the meeting was over. "And Mr. Chen, whatever you decide won't affect your regular position here. You have my word on that." Michael nodded, standing as well. "Thank you, sir." As he left the CEO's office, Michael's mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. The money would be a godsend for his family, but could he really perform in front of a crowd again after all these years? And did it bother him that he was being used partly as a PR stunt? When he returned to the maintenance office, Doug looked at him with wide eyes. "Is it true?" his supervisor asked. "Word's going around that you played piano for the big shots last night and blew them away." News traveled fast in the building. "It's not a big deal," Michael said, reaching for his cleaning cart. "Not a big deal? Chen, I've worked here 15 years and I've never heard of a maintenance worker getting called to Klein's office for anything good." Doug leaned in. "So what happened?" Michael sighed. He asked me to play at some charity gala next month. Offered to pay me, Doug whistled. Man, that's amazing. You're doing it, right? I don't know yet. It's complicated. What's complicated about it? Extra money for doing something you're good at? Seems simple enough to me. Maybe Doug was right. Maybe he was overthinking things. I need to talk to my kids about it. It would mean some late nights for practice, so talk to them. But don't pass this up, Chen. Opportunities like this don't come around often for guys like us. Guys like us. The phrase stuck with Michael throughout his shift. He'd never planned to be a janitor, to be one of those guys. It had just happened, one small decision after another, each one made to keep his family afloat. And now here was this chance to be something else. If only for one night. That evening after dinner, Michael sat his children down in their small living room. I need to talk to you both about something, he began, watching their curious faces. You know I work at that big office building downtown, right? Nate nodded. The glass one that looks like a giant icicle. That's right. Well, something unusual happened there. Michael took a deep breath and told them about playing the piano, about the executive's reactions, and about Klein's offer. If I do it, I'd need to stay late some evenings to practice. Mrs. Rodriguez would need to watch you more often. Lily's eyes were wide. You're going to play piano for rich people?
That's so cool, Dad.
It's just an offer right now. I haven't decided. Why not? Nate asked. It sounds like a good deal. Michael looked at his son, surprised by the simple question. Well, for one thing, I haven't really played in years. Not properly. I'm rusty. But you still play at the community center sometimes, Lily pointed out. I've heard you. You sound amazing. And you need the money, right? Nate added quietly. For my basketball stuff and Lily's braces next year. Michael felt a pang in his chest. His son was only 14 but already worried about family finances. That wasn't right. This isn't about money, he said firmly, though they all knew it partly was. It's about whether I can do it well. Whether I should be up there playing for these people who normally wouldn't give me a second glance. Nate considered this. Isn't that exactly why you should do it? To show them? Out of the mouths of babes, Michael looked at his son with newfound respect. When did you get so wise? Nate shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. I take after my dad. The next day, Michael informed Klein that he would play at the gala. The CEO seemed genuinely pleased, instructing his assistant to draw up the paperwork for the payment and to provide Michael with a key card that would give him access to the executive lounge for practice. For the next 4 weeks, Michael lived a double life. During the day, he cleaned floors, emptied trash, and went about his usual invisible routine. But in the evenings, after his regular shift, he would return to the 50th floor, unlock the executive lounge, and lose himself in music. The first few practice sessions were frustrating. His fingers weren't as nimble as they once had been, and pieces he'd known by heart years ago now required concentration and repetition. But slowly, the music began to flow more naturally. He started with simpler pieces, some Bach, a bit of Mozart, before working his way back to the more complicated Chopin and Debussy that had always moved him most deeply. Sometimes, he'd bring sheet music for new pieces he'd always wanted to learn but never had the chance to. He tackled them with the determination of a man who knew this opportunity might not come again, practicing until his fingers ached and his eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. On rare occasions, he wasn't alone. Sometimes an executive would wander in, surprised to find the janitor at the piano. Most would listen for a few minutes, offer a compliment, and then leave. Bradley Porter, the vice president who had dared him to play that first night, came in once, stood awkwardly by the door through an entire Beethoven sonata, then simply nodded to Michael and left without a word. One evening, about 2 weeks into his practice schedule, Michael was surprised to see Richard Klein enter the lounge. The CEO said nothing, just took a seat in a leather chair near the window, closed his eyes, and listened. Michael, after a moment's hesitation, continued playing, a particularly moving Chopin nocturne that spoke of both longing and acceptance. When he finished, Klein opened his eyes. My wife loved Chopin, he said quietly. So did mine, Michael replied. They shared a moment of understanding, two widowers connected briefly by music and loss, before Klein stood and straightened his tie. You'll be ready, he said, and it wasn't a question. Then he was gone, leaving Michael alone with the piano once more. At home, the children noticed the change in their father. Despite the longer hours and increased tiredness, there was a new energy about him, a sense of purpose beyond the daily grind of work and bills. He hummed while making dinner, his fingers occasionally tapping out rhythms on the countertop. Sometimes he would sit with Lily and help her practice her recorder for music class, showing a patience and enthusiasm that made the normally tedious exercises feel like fun. "Dad, can I come hear you play at the fancy party?" Lily asked one night as he tucked her in. Michael smiled. "It's not really that kind of event, sweetheart, but I promise I'll play for you and Nate afterward, anything you want to hear. Even the Star Wars theme? Even that." He laughed, kissing her forehead. The week before the gala, Klein's assistant approached Michael with details about the event, where to arrive, what to wear, the schedule for the evening. She also handed him an envelope. "Mr. Klein wanted you to have this in advance," she said. Inside was a check for $1,000, a third of his payment, with a note explaining the rest would follow after the performance. That evening, Michael took the kids out for pizza, something they rarely did due to the expense. As they sat in the bright, noisy restaurant eating slices loaded with toppings and laughing about their day, Michael felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. This was what it was all about, these moments with his children, seeing them happy and well. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Nate said unexpectedly as they walked home, the streetlights casting long shadows. Michael looked at his son, surprised. "For what?" Nate shrugged. "For doing this piano thing. It's brave." Michael felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks, buddy. That means a lot." The night before the gala, Michael stayed especially late at the piano, running through his planned program one last time. He had chosen pieces that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth, some classical favorites that the audience would recognize, and a few lesser-known gems that held personal meaning for him. As midnight approached, his fingers danced across the keys in a piece by Liszt that would be his finale tomorrow. The music filled the empty room, spilling out into the darkened hallways of the 50th floor, echoing slightly against the glass and steel of the building. When the final triumphant chords faded away, Michael sat still for a moment, hands resting on the keys. Tomorrow he would play this piano one last time, not as the invisible janitor but as a musician. For one evening, people would see him differently. He closed the piano gently, gathered his sheet music, and headed for the elevator. As he rode down to the ground floor, his reflection stared back at him from the polished doors, still in his gray maintenance uniform, but with a new light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Tomorrow would change nothing about his daily life. He would still be a single dad struggling to make ends meet. He would still clean floors and empty trash cans. But for a few moments, he would be reconnected with the part of himself he had set aside so long ago. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The day of the gala arrived with a sky full of heavy clouds threatening rain. Michael woke before his alarm, his stomach tight with nervousness. Today was the day. After nearly a month of preparation, he would sit at that Steinway in front of hundreds of wealthy, influential people and play his heart out. He went through his morning routine mechanically, making breakfast, helping Lily find her missing shoe, reminding Nate about his history project, normal things that somehow felt different today, as if he was watching himself perform them from a distance. "You're going to be amazing tonight, Dad," Lily said as he dropped them off at school, her face serious beneath her messy ponytail. "Yeah, knock 'em dead," Nate added with a half-smile that reminded Michael so much of Diane it made his chest ache. "Thanks, guys. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Be good for Mrs. Rodriguez, okay?" The arrangement was for him to stay overnight at a hotel near High Ridge Tower. The company was putting him up so he wouldn't have to worry about the late hour or transportation after the gala. It felt strange being treated like a guest artist rather than the man who cleaned the building's bathrooms. His regular shift that day passed in a blur. Doug had rearranged the schedule so Michael could finish early and have time to rest before the evening event. "Don't forget us little people when you're famous," Doug joked as Michael clocked out at 3 o'clock. "Right, because one charity gala is going to turn me into a concert pianist," Michael laughed, but there was a flutter in his stomach at the words. He checked into the hotel, a sleek, modern place 2 blocks from High Ridge Tower, and found himself in a room nicer than any he'd stayed in before. Everything was crisp and clean, from the white duvet on the king-sized bed to the gleaming bathroom fixtures. A garment bag hung in the closet with his name on it. Inside was a black suit, white shirt, and bow tie, his outfit for the evening provided by the company. The tag was still on the jacket, and Michael nearly choked when he saw the price. The suit alone cost more than a month of his salary. He laid down on the bed, intending to rest for an hour before getting ready. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, his mind racing through the pieces he would play, imagining his fingers on the keys, worrying about mistakes he might make. What if he froze up in front of all those people? What if they laughed or, worse, felt sorry for him? The ringing of the hotel phone startled him out of his thoughts. "Mr. Chen? This is Amber from Mr. Klein's office. Just checking that everything is to your satisfaction with the room and the suit." "Yes, everything's fine. Thank you." He hesitated, then asked, "What time should I arrive tonight?" "A car will pick you up at 6:30. The gala begins at 7, but Mr. Klein would like you there early to get comfortable with the space. You'll be playing at 8:15 after dinner." A car? They were sending a car for him? Okay, thank you. After hanging up, Michael decided a shower might help calm his nerves. As the hot water ran over him, he tried to focus on the positives. This was a good opportunity. He was being paid well. His kids were proud of him. And maybe, just maybe, he would enjoy performing again after all these years. By 6:15, he was dressed in the new suit, standing in front of the mirror, hardly recognizing himself. The man who looked back at him wasn't a janitor or a widower struggling to make ends meet. He looked like someone who belonged in the world he cleaned for every day, polished, confident, worthy of attention. The car that arrived was a sleek black town car with a uniformed driver who held the door for him. "Mr. Chen? I'm Ben. I'll be taking you to the Grand Plaza Hotel for the gala this evening." The drive took only 10 minutes, but it felt like entering another world. The Grand Plaza was one of the city's most luxurious hotels, its facade lit up with soft golden lights against the darkening sky. A red carpet led from the curb to the entrance, and men and women in evening wear streamed inside, laughing and chatting. Ben pulled up to the entrance. "Good luck tonight, sir," he said as he opened the door. Michael stepped out, adjusting his bow tie nervously. He felt out of place, like an imposter. Any minute now someone would point and say, "That's the janitor. What's he doing here in that suit?" But no one did. He walked up the red carpet and into the grand lobby of the hotel, where he was directed to a ballroom on the second floor. The space was enormous, with crystal chandeliers, tables covered in white cloths and decorated with elaborate flower arrangements, and at the far end, on a small raised stage, "The Steinway, Mr. Chen." Richard Klein appeared beside him, impeccable in his tuxedo. "You clean up well. Thank you, sir. This is quite an event." Michael gestured at the room, which was still filling with guests. "Indeed, the Children's Hospital is a cause close to my heart." Something flickered across Klein's face, a brief shadow of old pain. "Would you like to get familiar with the piano? There's time before everyone is seated for dinner." Michael nodded gratefully and followed Klein to the stage. The piano was similar to the one in the executive lounge, but somehow more intimidating here in this grand space. He sat down cautiously, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "I'll leave you to it," Klein said. "Someone will come get you when dinner is almost finished. Until then, there's a room in the back where you can wait." The next hour passed in a strange limbo. Michael sat in a small green room, listening to the distant sounds of the gala, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, occasional bursts of laughter. He flexed his fingers, ran through difficult passages in his mind, and tried not to think about all the important people out there. Finally, a young woman with a clipboard appeared at the door. "Mr. Chen?"
"They're ready for you."
"I'll introduce you, and then you can begin whenever you're comfortable." Michael stood, took a deep breath, and followed her to the edge of the stage. The ballroom was now filled with people at their tables, the remains of dinner being cleared away. Soft lighting created a warm, intimate atmosphere despite the size of the room. The young woman stepped up to a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, High Ridge Investments is pleased to present this evening's entertainment. Please welcome Michael Chen." The applause was polite but distracted as Michael walked to the piano and took his seat. Few people were really looking at him. Most were still chatting with their table mates or checking their phones. He was, for all intents and purposes, background music to them. Michael placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. Then he began to play. He started with something accessible, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, its familiar, haunting melody floating out over the crowd. Gradually, the chatter diminished. By the time he transitioned into the more complex second movement, the room had grown noticeably quieter. Gaining confidence, Michael moved into a Chopin piece, letting his fingers dance over the keys with increasing freedom. This was the music he loved best, emotional, expressive, filled with both technical challenges and heart-stopping beauty. He glanced up briefly and saw that people were watching now. Their conversations paused, their attention caught by the unexpected skill coming from the piano. Some had turned their chairs to face him directly. Encouraged, Michael lost himself in the music. He played pieces he'd practiced over the past month, but also improvised transitions between them, adding his own emotional interpretation to each. He thought of Diane, of the dreams they'd shared, of the music he'd set aside for so long. He thought of his children, of their pride in him, of all the bedtime stories and homework help and meals stretched to last until payday, all of it, the love and loss, the struggle and joy poured through his fingers into the music. When he finally began his last piece, Liszt's Liebestraum No. 3, the room was completely silent. The melody rose and fell, tender and passionate by turns, building to a transcendent climax before resolving into a gentle, peaceful conclusion. As the final note faded, Michael kept his hands on the keys, his head bowed, not quite ready to break the spell. Then the applause began. It started slowly, then swelled until it filled the ballroom. Michael looked up, startled by the volume and enthusiasm. People were standing, first a few, then entire tables, until the whole room was on its feet. In the front row, Richard Klein stood with an expression Michael had never seen on the CEO's face before, a mixture of admiration and what looked almost like regret. Next to him, a woman Michael recognized as Patricia Highridge, the company founder's daughter and current chairwoman of the board, was wiping tears from her cheeks. Michael stood awkwardly, unsure of the proper protocol. He gave a small bow, which only increased the volume of applause. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined this reaction. These people, wealthy, powerful people who would normally look through him, were applauding him, the janitor, as if he were a renowned concert pianist. After what felt like an eternity, the applause finally began to subside. Michael made his way off the stage, his legs slightly unsteady, his heart racing. In the wing, several people waited to shake his hand, offering congratulations and compliments. It was overwhelming, this sudden visibility after years of being overlooked. Mr. Chen. Patricia Highridge approached, her elegant evening gown shimmering under the lights. That was extraordinary, truly moving. Thank you, ma'am, Michael said, not knowing what else to say. Richard mentioned you work in our building? In maintenance? Her tone held no condescension, only genuine curiosity. Yes, ma'am. Going on 3 years now. She shook her head slightly, a smile playing at her lips. Well, you've certainly given us all something to think about tonight. She patted his arm and moved on to speak with someone else. For the next hour, Michael found himself in the strange position of being a guest at the gala, rather than just the entertainment. People sought him out, asked about his musical background, expressed amazement at his talent. Some even apologized for never having noticed him before in the building, though these interactions tended to be awkward for both parties. Through it all, Michael felt like he was walking in a dream. Was this really happening? Were these really the same people who had passed him in the hallways without a glance for years? As the evening wound down, Richard Klein found him by the dessert table. You exceeded all expectations, Mr. Chen, the CEO said, handing him an envelope. The rest of your payment as promised, plus a bonus. The donations tonight were nearly double what we anticipated. I believe your performance played no small part in that. Michael took the envelope, feeling its weight. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Klein studied him for a moment. You know, there's a position opening in our community outreach department. They handle our charitable giving, art sponsorships, that sort of thing. He paused. Someone with your talent and perspective could be valuable there. The salary would be considerably more than what you're making now. Think about it. Before Michael could respond, Klein was called away by another guest, leaving him standing there stunned. A job offer? In community outreach? The idea was so unexpected that Michael couldn't begin to process it. Later, As he sat in the back of the town car heading to his hotel, Michael opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $3,000 as agreed, plus an additional $2,000 as a bonus. $5,000, more than 3 months' salary from his maintenance job. He leaned back against the leather seat, watching the city lights blur through the window. In a single evening, everything had changed. People had seen him, really seen him, for the first time in years. They'd recognized something in him beyond his uniform and his job title, and now, potentially, a new door was opening, a chance at a different kind of life. As the car pulled up to the hotel, Michael thought about what he would tell Nate and Lily tomorrow, about how their faces would light up at the news of his success, at the possibilities suddenly before them. For the first time in a very long time, the future looked not just manageable, but bright with promise. Michael woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel room curtains he'd forgotten to close the night before. For a moment he lay still, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings and the silence. No kids getting ready for school, no neighbor's dog barking through the thin walls of his apartment. Then the memories of the previous evening came rushing back and he sat up, wondering if it had all been a dream. The suit hanging on the closet door and the envelope on the nightstand confirmed it had been real. He had played piano for a room full of wealthy strangers, received a standing ovation, and been offered a new job. All in one night. After a quick shower, Michael dressed in his own clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt he'd packed for the trip home. The contrast between these everyday clothes and last night's expensive suit felt symbolic somehow, as if he were stepping between two different versions of himself. He checked out of the hotel and took the bus home, the envelope safely tucked in his inner jacket pocket. The city looked the same as it always had, people hurrying to work, traffic backed up at intersections, the morning sun reflecting off glass buildings. But Michael felt different, as if something fundamental had shifted inside him. When he arrived at his apartment building, he found Mrs. Rodriguez and the kids eating breakfast in his kitchen. The older woman had obviously gone above and beyond, making pancakes and setting out orange juice, luxuries Michael rarely splurged on. "Dad." Lily jumped up from her chair and ran to hug him. "How was it?"
Did they like you?
"Did you play good?" "Well," Mrs. Rodriguez corrected automatically. But she too looked at Michael with eager curiosity. Michael hugged his daughter tightly. "It was amazing, sweetheart. Better than I ever expected. Did they clap a lot?" Lily asked, her eyes wide. "They stood up to clap," Michael told her, setting his bag down and joining them at the table. "All of them." "No way," Nate said, impressed despite his attempt to seem cool. "Standing ovation?" Michael nodded, helping himself to a pancake. "And that's not all." He pulled out the envelope and showed them the check inside. Mrs. Rodriguez gasped at the amount. "Dios mío! For one night of playing?" And Michael hesitated, still processing it himself. "The CEO offered me a different job at the company, in the community outreach department. It would pay a lot more than what I make now." "You're not going to be a janitor anymore?" Lily asked, sounding uncertain about this change. "I don't know yet, honey. I need to learn more about the job first." Michael looked at his children's faces, trying to gauge their reactions. "What would you think about that? If I did something different?" Nate shrugged. "If it means more money and you don't have to work nights and weekends all the time, sounds good to me." "But you're good at fixing things," Lily said. "Would you still fix our stuff if you had a fancy office job?" Michael laughed. "Of course I would. I'll always be your dad who fixes things, no matter what job I have." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, the family spent a lazy Saturday together, something that rarely happened due to Michael's usual weekend work schedule. They watched movies, ordered pizza for lunch, and in the afternoon, walked to the community center where Michael played the old upright piano for his children, showing them some of the pieces he'd performed at the gala. "You really are good, Dad," Nate said afterward, with the sincere surprise of a teenager discovering a parent has a life and talents beyond just being a parent. "Thanks, buddy." On Monday morning, Michael returned to High Ridge Tower back in his gray maintenance uniform. He felt strangely self-conscious, knowing that some of the executives who had applauded him Friday night would now see him pushing a cleaning cart again. Would they look at him differently? Or would everything go back to the way it was, with him being essentially invisible, The answer came almost immediately. As he crossed the lobby toward the maintenance office, he heard someone call his name. Mr. Chen, good morning. It was Vivian Taylor, the marketing executive who had been among the first to recognize him that night in the lounge. Good morning, Ms. Taylor, he replied, surprised. I just wanted to say again how much I enjoyed your performance Friday night. My mother was a piano teacher and she would have been impressed. Vivian smiled warmly. Has Richard talked to you about the community outreach position? Word traveled fast. He mentioned it, yes. You should consider it. The department could use someone with actual artistic talent. With a friendly nod, she continued on her way, leaving Michael standing there, slightly bewildered by the interaction. It wasn't the last such encounter that day. Throughout his shift, people who had never spoken to him before stopped to compliment his playing or ask about his musical background. Bradley Porter, the vice president who had dared him to play that first night, even apologized for what he called his thoughtless joke, saying he'd never expected to discover such talent. By lunchtime, Michael had been stopped so many times that he was behind on his cleaning schedule. As he hurriedly ate a sandwich in the basement break room, Doug sat down across from him. So, his supervisor said with a knowing look, You're quite the celebrity today. Michael shook his head. It's weird. Some of these people have walked past me for years without a word. That's how it goes. People see what they expect to see. Doug took a bite of his own lunch. Klein's assistant called down this morning. He wants to see you at 2 o'clock. Michael's stomach tightened. About the job? I assume so. You going to take it if he offers? It was the question Michael had been asking himself all weekend. The money would be better. Much better, probably. The hours would be more regular, allowing him to spend evenings and weekends with his kids. And the work itself might be meaningful, especially if it involved arts programs. But it would also be unfamiliar territory. He knew how to clean a building, how to fix things that were broken. Office work, meetings, emails, that was a different world. Would he fit in? Would the same executives who applauded him at the gala respect him in a conference room? I don't know, he admitted. What do you think I should do? Doug considered the question seriously. I think you should hear what he has to offer. But remember, whatever fancy title they give you, whatever desk they put you behind, you'll still be the same Michael Chen, the one who plays piano like an angel and puts his kids first. Don't let them change that part of you. At 2 o'clock, Michael knocked on Richard Klein's office door, still in his maintenance uniform. The CEO welcomed him in and gestured to the same chair he'd sat in a month ago when this whole unlikely journey began. Mr. Chen, I trust you've recovered from Friday night's excitement? Yes, sir. Thank you again for the opportunity. Klein nodded, getting straight to business. I mentioned a position in our community outreach department. We've been discussing it over the weekend, and I'd like to make you a formal offer. He explained the role, overseeing the company's arts-related charitable initiatives, including a new music education program for underprivileged schools that was still in the planning stages. The salary would be more than double what Michael currently earned, with better benefits and regular business hours. Your background gives you a unique perspective, Klein said. You understand the transformative power of music in a way many of our executives don't. And after Friday night, you have credibility with our board and major donors. Michael listened, trying to process it all. It sounds like an amazing opportunity. But I don't have experience in this kind of work. No degree, no office background. What you do have is talent, both as a musician and, from what I've observed, as a person. The rest can be learned. Klein leaned back in his chair. Take a few days to think about it. The position is yours if you want it. That evening, as Michael helped Lily with her homework at their kitchen table, his mind kept returning to the job offer. Dad, you're not listening, Lily complained when he missed her question about fractions. Sorry, sweetheart. I've got a lot on my mind. About the new job? The one where you wear a suit instead of your work clothes? That's the one. Lily considered this, her small face serious. Would you be happier if you took it? The question, in its direct simplicity, cut through all the practical considerations Michael had been weighing. Would he be happier? I think I might be, he said slowly. I'd get to help kids learn music. I'd be home more with you and Nate. Then you should do it, Lily said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Mom would think so too. Michael felt a tightness in his throat at the mention of Diane. You think so? Lily nodded confidently. She always said you played like your heart was singing. I remember. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Michael sat alone in the living room, thinking about Diane and what she would make of all this. He could almost hear her voice urging him to take a chance, to reclaim the part of himself that had been set aside for so long. The next morning, he called Klein's office and accepted the position. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. There was paperwork to complete, a new wardrobe to buy, though nothing as expensive as the suit from the gala, and a crash course in office culture from Vivian Taylor, who took Michael under her wing with surprising kindness. His last day in the maintenance department was bittersweet. Doug organized a small party in the break room, with a cake that read, "From janitor to executive, still one of us." The gesture brought tears to Michael's eyes. "You'll do great," Doug told him as they said goodbye. "Just remember where you came from." On his first day in his new role, Michael arrived early, nervous but excited. His office, he actually had an office, was small but had a window overlooking the city. On his desk was a framed photo of his kids that he'd brought from home and, to his surprise, a small plant with a note from Patricia Highridge. "To new beginnings." The work was challenging but rewarding. Michael found that his years of practical problem-solving served him well in navigating the complexities of program budgets and donor relationships. And when it came to the Music Education Initiative, his passion and personal experience gave him insights that impressed even the most skeptical board members. 6 months after the gala, Michael sat in the auditorium of a public school in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods, watching as elementary students performed on instruments provided by Highridge's new music program. The children played with more enthusiasm than skill, but their faces shone with pride and joy that Michael recognized from his own childhood experiences with music. Beside him sat Nate and Lily, now thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Nate was doing better in school, his basketball team was heading to the state championship, and with Michael home more regularly, their relationship had deepened in ways that made Michael's heart full. Lily had started piano lessons herself. Practicing on the used upright Michael had been able to buy for their new apartment, a small but significant upgrade from their previous home. After the concert, as they walked to their car, another new addition to their lives, Lily slipped her hand into Michael's. "Dad," she said thoughtfully, "remember when those people asked you to play piano as a joke? They thought you were just a janitor who couldn't do anything special." Michael nodded, wondering where she was going with this. "I'm glad they were wrong," she continued, "but also, I'm glad you were the janitor, because it makes this story better." Michael laughed, surprised by her insight. "What story is that?" "Our story," Lily said simply, "about how things can change when people really see you." Michael squeezed her hand, thinking about the journey of the past year. From invisible to seen, from struggling to stable, from a man who had set his passion aside to one who had reclaimed it and was now helping others find theirs. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. Life never is. There were still bills to pay, challenges to face, moments of doubt, but something fundamental had changed, not just in his circumstances but in himself. He had remembered who he was beneath the uniform, beneath the roles of janitor and widower and struggling parent. He had found his music again, and in that rediscovery he had taught his children the most important lesson he could, that it's never too late to be recognized for the song that's been in your heart all along.